Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cal Preach. Oh, my goodness, you guys. Jesus is my rock, and that is how I roll. Today, I have one of my besties on. I've never had a bestie on Cal Preach. Everybody, I want to introduce you to one of my oldest, dearest friends. This is Clarissa Dayne Hughes.
Hi, you guys. Hi, Cal Preach family. Love you. Thank you so much for having me, Chai. This is such
my goodness. I can't stand it. Holy Spirit, activate. Okay. So we are going to cover everything today on Clarissa's journey through life, everything from adoption, miscarriage, eating disorder, and ultimately how she found Jesus Christ and how, you know, her story was rewritten by God. I mean, ultimately it's about her redemption. And I'm so excited to share her with you, you guys, because she's just got one of the most beautiful souls in the entire world. And I'm so honored to know you, Clarissa. So honored to know you.
Love you.
You've helped me. I would not be who I am today without this woman, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So much to cover. You were adopted. I think it was when you were 6 days old. Is that right?
Yes, I was 6 days old. Adopted. My parents got the call and said, come get your baby. 2 days later, came and got me. That was it. Yep.
So tell us about that. What was it like to, grow up as an adopted child?
I didn't think anything about it until I asked my mother where babies came from. And she said to me, well, they come from their mother's belly. So I assumed I came from her belly. And then she said, well, actually, you came from another woman's belly and she gave you to me. And now I'm your mommy. And so I didn't really think anything of it. I felt chosen. She said to me a lot, you were chosen, which was a good way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my younger brother was also adopted. I wanted to be normal because I remember there was a stigma a little bit around adoption back then. And I just thought, I need to be normal. I need to be normal. And yeah, that didn't work out for me so much.
Yeah. And so what age did you realize that I mean, I know you just said your mom said that you came from another belly, but at what age did you ever have a feeling of like pain around it that you were adopted or never?
I was probably 4 or 5 when I found that out. The only time, and this is, bless him, my dad meant everything good about it, but he did say to me one night, I was about 10 or 11, and he said, does it bother you that you're adopted? I just want you to know if it ever bothers you, I want you to know that you can come to me. Now, his intention was sweet and kind and loving, but the word bother and adoption didn't make sense for me. So suddenly I thought, should this be bothering me? And I became very curious about where did I come from? Why do I look the way I look? Why do I feel the way I feel? Who am I? So it opened up a big can of worms, sort of this, anywhere in the world could be my mother. So it was too big and too broad. It was confusing.
Was there an abandonment feeling attached to it or not? Really?
Yes. I mean, after a while, I really thought how I see my friends and see that they looked like their mom or their dad, or they looked like their sisters and brothers, and I didn't have that. So suddenly I really felt, how could a mother give away her baby? I just didn't understand it. I do now, and it's such a complete blessing. And what a gift for my mother who couldn't have children. But I definitely went through the abandonment issue a lot.
And so you went to boarding school at a really young age. I mean, you were how old?
I was 14 and I was starting to get into a little bit of trouble, and my parents decided it was best to shove me off to try to straighten me out and send me to boarding school. And that kicked up every abandonment issue I ever had. I mean, that hit me probably worse than ever. I was sobbing. I was a sobbing mess. An entire weekend, I was begging them to let me come back home. And why would they even adopt me if they were just going to, set me free again and just push me away? And I was devastated. That was really hard.
So you were kicking and screaming all the way to boarding school. You did not.
Did not want to go. And then it ended up fine. My mother did give me this sort of, if you're going to have to do it, you may as well find the best in it. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going. I may as well try.
And you stayed the whole 4 years? You went the whole 4 years there?
Yeah, 14 to 18. And I had a lot of resentment about it.
Yeah.
No question. I had resentment. That's when my eating disorder started. I think I felt out of control. Um, I felt like if I could just fix myself and be better, they would take me back. And I felt very broken. That's when my brokenness started
So
to.
would you consider it almost a double abandonment? Like you were adopted and then you were put in boarding school? Do you think that like even on a subconscious level, it might have kicked up some of your abandonment issues when you were sent off to boarding school, or did you not make that connection?
For sure, I did. And even when I was 11 or 12, I remember I would do things and push my mom. I'd push, 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 because I thought, if my birth mother gave me away, certainly this one will give me away. So I may as well just get it over with. So I'm just going to push her. And I was really, not very nice. I mean, I was a kind child. I reached out to children that I felt were like new in class and that kind of thing. I really had a soft heart for that, but I felt like my parents were going to give me away, so I may as well just make it happen. I had that whole I'm going to pull the rug out from under me first before someone else can do it.
And it was a Christian boarding school. Am I correct that it was a
No,
Christian?
well, no, it wasn't. It wasn't like Christian, but we did have to go to church every Sunday, and we had to take a religion class. Like that was absolute. We had to. And so I had some church. My mom kind of, I think, did the right thing and had me. I was baptized, and then I had my first Holy Communion, and then I had my. I was confirmed, but it was sort of, I think, to go along with the Joneses a little bit, because at my house, everyone was an atheist. No one talked about God at all.
Did you take to the word Jesus? Did you take to the Bible?
Not in high school. In fact, I remember thinking, what do these people have to do with me? This was 2,000 years ago. I was very arrogant, very heels in the ground, very, this is for weak people. Intellectuals don't do this. Not that I was an intellect. I was not. But I came from that background of, you're too smart for this. Weak people need Jesus.
So would you say that you were like repelled by the name Jesus, or it was more just that you were like, good for you, not for me kind of thing?
No, I was repelled, and I felt I was, no question. I mean, and I remember when I moved to New York later after I went to college, and my whole eating disorder really took off there. And I remember sometimes people would say, you need Jesus, and I was so like, get away, no, 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 and yeah, I was very repelled, which is so funny because deep down I really knew. I think we all do. I think we all have some deep connection that we know. But that's how strong the pull of the world is. And the pull of the world was so strong that even with everything I really knew deep down, I fell for that. That it was hogwash, that it didn't mean anything. And so I was lost.
Amazing. So then you talked about eating disorder. So it really kicked in high school. Is that what you were saying? That the eating disorder got worse in high school? Because it started at home before high school a little bit, right? Like the controlling of the food.
Yes, 7th and 8th grade is when we all kind of started to be very self-conscious. I remember that was the self-consciousness, like thinking how we look. I was never skinny enough. I was never pretty enough. So all of that started to kick in. And then in high school, I remember I went on a diet and I started eating chef salad, but it was filled with cheese. And I didn't know how to diet. I didn't know how to do anything. I thought you either starve to get skinny, or you go ahead and just eat everything. So that began my yo-yo dieting, and it was probably 20, 25 pounds up, 25 down, 30 up, 30 down. So it was really, swings of 25, 30 pounds.
And if you could describe how you felt at your top weight on the inside, like how did it made Clarissa feel when you were at your top weight and you had to walk around with that? How did it feel? What were you saying to yourself? What words were you saying to yourself?
You're so fat, you're so out of control. Why can't you do this right? What's the matter with you? What's wrong with you? And my top weight, so after high school and I went to college, I really did not want to go to college at all. So my feeling out of control really was exasperated then. And that's when I started bulimia. So friends were like, oh, well, if you eat too much, just go get rid of it. And I thought, oh, how genius. Worst ever. Don't start. I became like a marionette. And it started once a week. You know, if I was on my diet and then I lost control, then I would just get rid of it. And it got worse and worse. Then it was twice a week, then 4 times a week, then once a day, then twice a day, then up to like 8 times a day. But I can't even express how that felt. And it was so many years ago. We're talking 35 years ago. But the feeling of like looking in the mirror and knowing what I just did, and the disgust and shame and horror, it just snowballed, and it got worse and worse and worse.
That's because I had an eating disorder myself. Like I remember standing in front of the toaster with a loaf of bread and margarine of all things. And I would stand in front of the toaster and I'd just keep toasting and spreading the margarine and keep toasting and spreading the margarine. I would go through, Clarissa, a loaf
of bread.
Yes. And then what would I do? Jump in the car, go to the gym, work it off as hard as I could. And then I would feel complete remorse. I would cry and cry and cry. And then I'd go eat a pint of ice cream. Like it was just carbs and sugar, carbs and sugar. That's what I lived on for years. And I'll tell you something, you know, I had a drug problem. Nothing took me down faster than food. Nothing took me down faster than food. That brought me to my knees. Yes. I mean, I never even understood eating disorders before that. I don't even really know how it started. It was all so insidious. But I just remember one day thinking, oh, this is a big problem. Like I'm in trouble. I'm in big trouble. Did you have that moment of clarity? Like I'm in big trouble. When did that happen for you?
It got so bad. I was ordering pizzas, loaves of bread, same thing. I was melting bags of peanut M&Ms on my stove and drinking the chocolate. I mean, it was so bad. And I really, really started to lose it. I called my mom. The worst thing was I saw on the cover of People magazine, Karen Carpenter, and she had just died. This makes me want to cry. I feel like in so many ways she saved my life, and God did. That I called my mom and I was like, I can't believe it still upsets me, you know, when I think about it, that I'm going to die. If I don't get help, I'm going to die. And I said to my mom, you need to come get me. I didn't even tell her why. I just knew I was going to die if I didn't get help. So she got me from school. I flopped out, you know, of college. She brought me home. I knew I had to get a therapist and had to get help. I had never even uttered the word bulimia. I had so much guilt and shame. I was so disgusted with myself. Went to a therapist and she was it was still new. I think back then it was in the 80s. And she just sat there and said, you know, well, you have to stop throwing up. And I thought, I'm paying you for this. I know that. I know. How do I stop? And I'd leave her and then I would go to, you know, Burger King, and then I would go to the supermarket and I would eat, and I couldn't stop. And something in me, this was the first time I felt God stir within me. And I didn't know what it was, but now I do. But that it was, you have to keep the food down no matter what. You have to start there. If it means that you gain 100 pounds, then so be it. You have to keep the food down. So that was the first step. And I gained 60 pounds in like 2 months. But I felt free. I had never felt free before. I felt free of the bulimia. So suddenly, it was amazing. And I had never been heavier, but I had never felt freer. So that was really a wake-up call for me about this. What I think the size of my body will fix everything, it didn't matter. It was about my freedom and my sense of peace.
Amazing. So then would you say that you had like body dysmorphia? Like if you looked in the mirror, would you be like, okay, I know what I see. And were you seeing it correctly or no?
It's funny is that I was almost 200 pounds at that point and I lost like 10 or 15. And suddenly I felt like, look at me, right? And I mean, then I had been as small as almost 103 pounds and I could gain 5 pounds and feel like it was 30. So I really, really learned that it truly was what was between my ears, because it had nothing to do with really the size of my body. It had to do with what I was thinking and how I was feeling. So that's how crazy it can be.
Amazing. Yeah. So you were throwing up to about 8 times a day, and then you got it under control. You went to go see a therapist, but it was kind of like she was just telling you, you just got to stop throwing up. And you were like, duh, you think?
Yeah.
And then you were able to sort of figure it out for yourself, which is amazing. I mean, I had to go see a food specialist, and she helped me get on a diet, a program of, not a diet, but like a program of eating. And she basically made me cut out all the sugar because she said that's the addiction. But that's amazing.
Well, and that it didn't end completely. I thought it did, but that was temporary. So then what happened was I got into a whole healthy thing, and I did it on my own, and I was reading self-help books, and I was getting healthy, and I was doing it was great. But what ended up happening was we were going through a really tough financial situation in my family. Terrified me, like financial insecurity, making decisions, feeling out of control, feeling binge, B-I-N-G-E, because I'm not good enough. That was huge for me.
Oh, that's huge.
Music industry, I was having issues with different men in the music industry. Like a lot of stuff was coming up. So I ended up binging on air pop popcorn and celery sticks and carrots to the point where I was so full I couldn't breathe. And it suddenly occurred to me, this really doesn't have to do with anything other than I'm looking for peace. Because if you stuff yourself, like think about Thanksgiving, what do we all do? We go, I'm so full. That kind of anchorage, of grounding, of I can breathe, like a deep breath. That's what I really craved. And it took me so long to figure that out. And then I went into I did go into treatment. I went into recovery programs a lot. Needed 12-step, which brought me to the Bible, because once I got into 12-step, I was like, well, I'm going to quit drinking. I'm going to quit everything. I want to go to meetings and figure out what this is. I went to specialized big book meetings, and they told me that it came from the book of John. So that's how I was introduced 30 years ago to the Bible, was through the book of John and the book of Matthew. And the first, I'll just say quickly, the one, therefore I tell you, do not, this is Matthew 6:25. And it was the first verse I ever heard that it really resonated for me, because, I was like, Bible, and I read this, therefore I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will drink, or about your body, what you will wear. It is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes. And I thought the Bible has something about food, because I always was terrified that I would never get my next meal. I literally would have to say, Clarissa, you have all the food you need. It's okay. Like meal to meal was terrifying to me. Terrifying. I'm not sure exactly what that's about, except when I was a kid, I sometimes got put to bed without dinner. I was afraid of starving. And I had to pray a lot and balance that out to get to the point where my body, I could trust, find trust, and that God would take care of me, that God gave me this body, and that if I listen, it's okay to get hungry. It's okay to then feed yourself. It's okay to eat food. I had to make friends with food again, because I have a love-hate relationship with food.
Yeah. We're in New York City now. So right after high school, you moved directly. Well, you went home for a little bit, and then you went to New York.
Went to New York, yeah.
Okay. So, I was in New York too. And that's where we met, which is really awesome. And I know that you, tell us the story about you and Greg.
Okay. So I had some not great relationships, and sort of like a broken antenna. And I'd always say, I need to break my antenna and really search. So also I decided, instead of waiting for the guy to roll over my foot with a shopping cart and go, he's the one. So I decided to date platonically a bunch of people to really just see who would land. And Greg, I had seen him around the neighborhood, was very, very cute. He scared me. I felt like he's not available. He's got to be gay, or he's married, or he has a girlfriend. Certainly he's not available. But, and he rode a beat up red bike, which I love. And so I'd seen him in the neighborhood. He was 2 brownstones down from me. And he one day, after about a year and a half, came up to me when I was walking the dogs and said, where have you been? Those are the first words he ever said to me. Where have you been? And I, of course, went, who, me? I didn't think he was talking to me. I had no makeup on, sweatpants, the whole deal. It was so organic, and it was really, really God that did that, because I had always sort of put on the face, and tried to make myself be what I thought somebody might want, instead of just be me. And as Greg and I developed our friendship, I remember thinking, we're just going to be friends. And, you take it or leave it. This is me. And I had never been more myself ever before. And
I remember I met him for the first time when you guys were dating at Jameson's first birthday, and he was in a cast. He had like broken his leg or his foot or something. And then I saw him because he worked with elderly people, and I saw him crossing the street with this elderly woman. And I called you up immediately, and I was like, you're going to marry this guy. I just want you to know you are definitely going to marry this guy. I just got this overwhelming feeling like this is Clarissa's husband, because I could just see his heart. I could just see that he was such a beautiful human being. So go on, tell the story.
He was. It was so sweet that you did that. I love it. And I'll never forget that. And you were right. Here we are 18 years later. Still 20 years together almost, which is so crazy. But we went to church together. And I remember thinking, I really want somebody who truly is faithful. And I had tried that before, and it kind of fell on its heels. And there were a few times in all these years where I felt rattled, where my faith felt a little bit shaken and a little bit rattled. And for me, it started with the moon, because I came from like, don't talk about Jesus, to, okay, a higher power. All right, the moon. I trust that the moon is there. Like, even if the clouds are there, the sun rises in the morning. I have faith that the sun will rise tomorrow morning. So my faith started literally like a mustard seed. And it just grew and grew and grew. And the more I read the word and the more I connected, the more I really realized, this is real. Like, there's a solid truth here. Proverbs really got me. Certain verses, be still and know that I am God. Like, I realized the serenity prayer was something that I said, God grant me serenity. So I realized it isn't God grant me a skinny body. It isn't God grant me the perfect, home or perfect man or a perfect job or record deal or anything. It's God grant me serenity. So I really started to get that serenity had to be my goal. That's what Jesus wants for us.
And did Greg pray with you? Was he open to praying with you?
Yes, and we started reading daily scripture together. We started going to church together, and I felt it. And when people say, like, who the one is, it was the first time I felt that. I knew it, and I knew that we were. I never really wanted children, but I had this feeling that we were going to create children together. I can't even explain it, but that is God. That is God. He knew, I didn't, but something in me knew that this was the one. He wanted to move to Florida, and I was like, oh no, we're not moving to Florida. Remember, I told you he wanted to move back to Florida. Yeah, and I was like, I'm not living in Florida. And you said, you never know, he might stay in New York. And I was like, oh, that's true. But then I've been in Florida for 19 years, and I love it.
Amazing. So now let's talk about the children thing. So tell us about the first time you actually got pregnant. Like, you get married, you have a beautiful wedding. I was there. It was a gorgeous wedding.
Yes.
And so how many months after your wedding did you get pregnant?
Honeymoon.
On the honeymoon.
Yeah. Because listen, I was 39. So I thought, let's go. So we had a really fun honeymoon, to say the least. And then we came home, and a few weeks later, I took a pregnancy test, and it said positive. And I remember this feeling of like terror, like what goes in must come out. I was like, oh, guess I'm having a baby. But I had been through your literal childbirth. I mean, I was rubbing your feet when you were in labor with Jameson. I was at the hospital. I was at the hospital for Vance. I was there when Connie had her baby. So I felt like, okay, it's going to be okay. And that's when I just kept really leaning into God and thinking, it's going to be okay. I've got Jesus, and this is all right.
So you had Katie, beautiful, beautiful Katie, normal pregnancy. Everything went fine.
Yes.
And then how long after Katie did you try again?
Well, and let me say too, I did find my birth mother when I was 27. And when I had Katie, actually when you had Jameson, was the first time that it really hit me. I remember you had Jameson, and we came into the room right after you had her, and the nurse came in and said, we just have to take her to go, do whatever. And I started sobbing, and I couldn't believe it, how much that hurt me. But I felt like, imagine her being taken away from you. Like, it gutted me. And so because
it reminded you of your own adoption.
Yes. And I never thought Right. And I felt like if I ever had children, that what I give them up to was that something that was in my blood. And when they put Katie on my belly, I just, you know, anyone who's had a child, it's just the most unbelievable feeling. And all of a sudden, mama instincts, like I had my mom there because I was like, I don't know what to do. I was a nanny and I had done all that stuff, but this was different. But all of a sudden I was like, I got this. Give me that baby, you know?
Amen. So how much longer after that did you try and get pregnant again?
We waited about a year and then shabam, we got pregnant right away. And I called you. It's so funny how you're so tied into this. I called you and I said, I'm pregnant. And you said, so am I. And I was like, no, you're not. Come on. And you said, I am. And I go, what? Come on. You are not. You're kidding me. And you're like, no, I really am. I'm pregnant. And it was, and I thought, oh, we're going to have a baby together. And we would do the same day, like December 5th or December 7th. And I was so excited. And then Greg, for my birthday, gave me a spa. And I went up to the spa and I started spotting. And that was first. I'll tell you, the first miscarriage, it's really hard. But I thought, okay, you know, I know that this could happen. It's okay. I trust. And I prayed and I was like, it's going to be okay. And we went to our church. We were involved in like Bible study.
Did you know that Billy and did you know that we miscarried before we got married? Did you know that we were pregnant before?
Thanks. No. Did I know?
Yeah. I had a miscarriage before Jameson. Yeah. I was pregnant when we were engaged. I got pregnant. Super, super painful. And I was in the Caribbean. It was a nightmare on a Sunday. Trying to get home was a nightmare. But yeah, I remember the devastation around my miscarriage. Yeah, it was really, really hard.
It is hard. And it's confusing because you feel like, well, I didn't meet them. But the love you have for a child the minute you know you're pregnant is inexplainable. And that's sort of that whole invisible world thing. You know, I love Jesus with all my heart and soul. I haven't touched his physical. It doesn't matter. It's love. And so that was hard. Yeah, it was awful.
Did you have DNC and the whole thing?
Not with that one. I passed the baby. And we got pregnant again within a few months. And again, was just so excited. And I really decided that I'm going to always tell everybody, because I think that was for me. I think the prayers are good. No matter what happens, I can use the prayer to get through it. And so I did. And we had another miscarriage.
A second
one. So we had a second miscarriage, and within a week or two, Greg and I were involved in our music ministry, and we had a job to go over to a retreat, a really large retreat. And so we were playing in the band for that, and they had speakers. But when we got there Friday night, I sort of had one of those things with God. And I remember saying to Greg, I don't even know what to pray for. I had a moment, right? The second it left my lips, I saw him turn around and look at me like, what are you talking about? The second it left my lips, I realized I need to pray for peace, guidance, courage, strength, wisdom, patience, God's will. That's what I need to pray for. Not what I want. Pray for God's will. I don't know how this meant. I didn't know. The next day they had a speaker, and the speaker still moves me to tears. She had everything. They were both doctors. They had two beautiful boys. They wanted only a girl. They wanted a girl so badly. They had a girl. She ended up having spinal muscular atrophy, which is basically certain death within a couple of years. She took this child everywhere, had the child prayed over, the whole thing, and they still lost her. And there she was telling her testimony and how much she loved Jesus, even losing her daughter. And she said, then they got pregnant again, had another child, another girl, and the same thing. This other child also had the same disease. I just thought, look what God does. God put this woman in my life. I had two miscarriages. I didn't even meet them. She's going through this with two who she actually met. And her strength and her faith was so strong. And those are the people where I always said, I want that. Because catastrophe can happen. And we can either catastrophize it or look for the blessings. And I feel like when Christians are really walking it, like when I'm feeling really close to Christ, I will look for the blessing. I know when I start to spiral into, why is this happening to me? I have to stop and go, where is the blessing. So that was really going to kind of give my faith. So we left there, got pregnant again. And I was so excited. And
third time. Now you get pregnant a third time. Okay.
Third pregnancy. Really excited. At this point, I had joined an online support group. I'm all about support groups. It was called LAM, Life After Miscarriage. LA. If anybody's going through this, I can't recommend it enough.
LAM, LAM.
Life After Miscarriage. And so they were all talking about, I remember there was one girl that was having really multiple. So I felt like I can just keep doing this. It's okay if God wants us to have a child. And I started to feel like, should we just be blessed with our one? Every time it happened, I felt like it was such a blessing. Or should we keep trying? And I started to get a little bit like, okay, God, what do you want me to do? Just tell me. I'll do it. Do you want me to adopt? Do you want me to just have one child? But I felt like I'm pregnant. It's okay. Lost the third one. So 3, then I was like, okay, let's go again. So because I had these women and they were also going through losses, and I felt like we can do this, and we all lifted each other up, and we all prayed together, and we all thought we can do this, we can do this. And
then at this point, were you thinking to yourself, you just kind of said it, but like, did you think maybe this is God telling me that I'm supposed to adopt just like I was adopted? Like, did you think maybe this is a sign?
Yeah, I did. So I thought, we'll try a few more times or whatever. And if not, maybe that's something we need to look into. But in my prayer, I was really like, okay, just give me a really clear sign. It's almost like we want God to just spell it out for us.
Yeah.
It's always that way. And that's sometimes hard to, because I'm a controller. I want to know, just tell me. Come on. And my mind can start spinning. I always say, like, when I invited Jesus to move into my brain, it was a really good thing because he had a lot of cleaning up to do. And so he like sweeps out all of my stinking thinking, right?
So this is the 4th time now.
Pregnant again, 4th pregnancy after Katie. So number 5 altogether. And it was Katie's 3rd birthday, and we went to Chuck E. Cheese. We invited all of the cousins. My husband comes from 8. So just the family alone is like 40. And then you have friends on top of that. So there were so many people at this party. It was her 3rd birthday party. We were all excited, and I started to miscarry this 4th baby. And I had to hold it together. Like, I'm at this birthday party, and I'm running back and forth to the bathroom because I'm starting to bleed. A few weeks later, I would say probably 3 or 4 weeks later, I was distraught. I was enough with the, okay, God, all right, just tell me what to do, trying to be all pushy about it. Yeah. And I lost it. I fell on the bed, hysterical crying, yelling at God, what do you want me to do? I was screaming, crying, absolutely hysterical, couldn't even think straight. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I hear these words. Why do you see this as a loss and not as a gain? And I was like, what? And I knew that was God's voice because I was in hysterics. And that's what God does. He cuts through the mire and gives you comfort. And a few times in my life, I've heard that so clearly. I know I've only touched on a couple of them, but so many. I'm writing a book to try and get all of this out. But that was one of the really clear ones. Suddenly, and this is how I know it's God, total peace, unexplainable peace. And I felt like, I can't even explain it. I was fine. I dusted myself off, got up. Okay. What I didn't know was at that moment, I was already pregnant with our son. And that is amazing to me still. So something I learned through LAM was that multiple miscarriages can sometimes, especially when you're a little older, can be caused by thick blood or like the blood coagulating so that the nutrients can't get to the baby. So I went to, it was so funny. It was a few weeks. All the girls were getting pregnant on this LAM site. And I thought, I think I have one more pregnancy test. I'm just going to take one for kicks. And I took it and I was pregnant. So I went to the doctor and said, I need to take a blood thinner. That's what they're saying I need to do. So the Love and Ox is another thing. My husband was between jobs and we had no insurance. And he said it would cost $3,000 a month. So I was like, we're going to lose the baby because we can't do that. And he said, well, I have another option that's a little bit cheaper. And I thought, probably still can't do it. It was $90 a month to give my shots twice a day. So can't go back, and do it without the shots to see. But my son was born healthy. December 27th, a miracle, a miracle. And it just, that was God. And every step of the way, the fact that I was in Lamb, the fact that I felt like he just laid out the path for me. And that was my path. And it may have been adoption, but that would have been fine. But it was, and I knew it was God. And my daughter knew that it was a boy when I was 10 weeks pregnant. She kept saying, Mom, it's a boy. I know it's a boy. I'm having a baby brother. And his name is, she named him. Yeah, she knew. And I was,
she named him too. Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
and we weren't going to do Jack. But I looked in the book and it was Jackton. We found Jackton, Jacdon, which also meant God has heard.
Wow. That's God. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
Amazing.
So beautiful. So you have 4 miscarriages and then you give birth to Jack and he's healthy. He's a healthy baby boy. Yeah. So you got to Florida. Now you have 2 kids. You have a husband. You have your home. And how are you feeling about your relationship with God? Because you were so focused on like getting pregnant. And I know you were praying the whole time and that you were staying close to God. But you know how you kind of get that feeling like, now what? Like, I've got my kids. Yes. I've got my house. I've got my husband. Did you have that moment where you were like,
I think with the kids and stuff, it felt like my job suddenly. You know, I definitely came from when I was little. You know, I had this dream that I would look out my window and there are all these trees like for miles and miles. And I thought, I want to know everyone. Like when I found out people died every 2 or 3 seconds, I was devastated because I was like, I'm not going to meet them. You know, I wanted to know everyone. And so I also felt like that was how I was going to find my mother. I was obsessed with music. I thought, okay, that's going to be my thing. I'm going to get famous. I'm going to do music and make people feel happy. It'll be a double thing. It'll be great. And then when I'm famous, I'll be able to find my mother. Fame to me meant I'll find my mother. Once I found my mother at 27, my birth mother, everything else like sort of fell away. It didn't really matter to me anymore because also anonymity meant so much to me.
So how did you meet your birth mother?
I had to search for her. She lived in Greece. So that was another God thing.
Right. And I forgot that.
Yeah. I went through this company called Adoptive Liberty Movement Association and had a guy help me, but ultimately like went to the birth record books. I was the 5th generation to be born in New York. So I got all this identifying information. I ended up going to the adoption agency and actually tricking her into telling me who my mother was, what her name was. And then it found out, I mean, it's a long story, but my uncle, her brother lived in Connecticut and he got the note from me and then told me that she lived in Greece. So I flew to Greece.
But you also found out that you had a sister.
Sister that I always wanted. I used to beg my mother for sisters and I have 2. So I have one on my father's side and one on my mother's side. So I flew to Greece to meet my mother and my sister. That was amazing. I'm writing about that now. And at one point, I was in the car. I'll never forget this. We're driving across the plains of Greece, and I see my mother driving and my sister in the passenger seat. And that was the first time when I was 27. God is real. God is real. I was like, thank you. It was the first time I really thanked God from the bottom of my heart. I really got it.
So, I know this has been like a crazy few years in your family. I know that you've had a lot of loss. I know that it's been tragedy after tragedy in your family. And I know it's hard to talk about, but I think it might help other people if you could just maybe tell a little bit about what you've had to contend with over the past few years.
Yeah, a lot of loss. We lost my nephew 11 or 12 years ago now, I think it is. That was the first big loss. So like I said, my husband's from a really big family and we're all very close. We would get together once every week. And my nephew was 22 when he was diagnosed with melanoma, stage 4. And we lost him at 23. And then 5 years after that, we lost another nephew to a really tragic motorcycle accident. And I read that book years ago, which I should probably read again. Why do bad things happen to good people? And because I felt like, okay, God, just like with the pregnancies, I lost 1, 2, 3, really 4. I have to lose 4. And it was sort of, we lost 1 nephew, really 2. We have to lose 2. And, you know, we did a paddle out for my nephew who was killed in the motorcycle accident. And during the paddle out is when you go out into the middle of the ocean with hundreds of people, right? Yeah. And it's to, honor them. And he loved the water. And when the sun was setting, 2 clouds raised. And it was almost like they were throwing their heads back laughing. And we all looked at them and said, look at that. Do you see that? And we knew. We were like, they're together. And it's okay. It's okay.
Wow.
And we had so many signs. I mean, anytime we've lost somebody, it's just been sign after sign after sign. And undeniable. And I came from, if one thing happened, I'd be like, maybe it's a coincidence. But it's just over and over and over. And the more I hear people's stories, the more I know that it's true. I had an incident where, I won't go into it, but I had a near-death experience when I was 2.5. So it kind of all clicked in for me again. And it became very, very real. So, and I'm writing about that too. I'll go into the details later, but it is so real. What we don't see, the invisible world, is so much more powerful than the physical world. That prayer, I love what you say, forwarding all issues to heaven, is we send out those feelings. And so that was a sign that we all needed. And there were a lot of signs the rest of the night too. So we knew he was okay.
Yes. And I had all of California preaching for your friend, Susan, Clarissa. Everyone was praying for her. And I'm so sorry for your loss. I know she was such a good friend of yours. And that's another great loss that you just had in the past few weeks. So
losing her was devastating, especially now because, we couldn't visit her with the COVID. And I know right now too, for everybody who's suffering loss right now, my heart just goes out to you. What I can say is I know heaven is real. I know it without a shadow of a doubt. And I've seen and been, and it's connected with other people who've had near-death experiences. There's no explanation why somebody I've never even met saw what I saw. So that I can say for sure. Heaven is real.
And look at how we met. Heaven is real. I mean,
honey, crazy.
We met in a church. I mean, you're literally walking down the aisle with your bouquet of flowers, looking stunning, of course, walking down the aisle, holding your flowers. And I could see you were a bit nervous. You were just shaking like a little leaf. And I just gave you a little wink like that. And you smiled back at me. We were complete strangers. And then a few weeks later, I was having a meeting at my house and your friend just said, oh, you want to go over to my friend's house? She's having a meeting. And you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, it's China. And we've been good friends ever since then. It's just so amazing that we met in God's house.
We met in
God's house.
It still amazes me because you winked at me. I was so nervous and you winked at me and it gave me that sense of peace. So now I know Jesus had this all planned. I mean, for sure.
Oh, yeah. He had it all planned. Clarissa, I love you so much. Thank you so much, honey, for talking to us today and for sharing your heart and your story and your testimony, because every test can turn into a testimony. And obviously he's rewritten your story. And I just love you so much. And God bless you. Peace of Christ.
Thank you.
Everybody, say goodbye to Clarissa Dayne Hughes and signing off on California Preaching.